Nate Turner's architect eyes had assessed thousands of structures over his 30-year career, but nothing prepared him for watching his 28-year marriage collapse in the elegant doorway of Castelli's restaurant. He stood frozen, briefcase in hand, as his wife Ashley leaned intimately toward a man at least 15 years his junior. When the young man noticed Nate, he didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled and spoke the words that would redefine everything. "Your woman belongs to a real man now." In that moment, Nate counted his options like he'd once counted ceiling beams, with precision that had earned him awards across 3 states. What Nate couldn't know then, this public humiliation would become the blueprint for reclaiming not just his dignity, but the future Ashley thought she'd already spent. Sometimes, the most devastating betrayals lead to the most satisfying reckonings. The Palladian windows of Nate's home office framed the autumn sunset as he adjusted the line weight on his latest Civic Center design. After 30 years as an architect, his hand still moved with the precision that had earned him the Henderson Award last spring. On his bookshelf, the crystal trophy stood beside a framed photo from their wedding day, Ashley radiant in ivory, her hand resting possessively on his arm. His desk phone rang, displaying his most important client's number. "Turner here," Nate answered, automatically straightening his posture, though no one could see him. "Nate, it's Greg from Westview Development. The board loved your presentation. We're greenlighting the community center project." "That's excellent news. I'll have the revised schematics for you by Tuesday." Nate's voice carried the measured confidence that had become his professional signature. As he hung up, Ashley appeared in the doorway, wrapped in the cashmere sweater he'd given her for their last anniversary. These days, it seemed she wore his gifts only when asking for something. "Working late again?" she asked, her tone suggesting mild disappointment rather than genuine interest. "Just finished, actually. Greg approved the Westview project." "That's nice, honey." She glanced at her watch, the Cartier he'd surprised her with after his promotion. "Don't forget, we have reservations at Castelli's tomorrow, our anniversary week tradition." Their anniversary wasn't for 2 weeks, but Nate didn't correct her. Lately, these small discrepancies had been accumulating like design flaws in a blueprint, easy to miss individually, alarming in aggregate. "6 o'clock, he confirmed. "I've been looking forward to it." She smiled, the expression not quite reaching her eyes. "I need to run some errands." "Don't wait up." Nate watched her leave, remembering when they'd met at a university fundraiser, her laughter drawing him across the room like a carefully placed focal point in an architectural design. They'd built a life together, his career, their modern home he'd designed himself, the social circle that had expanded with his professional success. But something had shifted in the last year. Ashley's errands multiplied. Her phone buzzed with text messages she'd angle away from his view. New clothes appeared in her closet, items he hadn't seen the charges for, styles more youthful than her usual taste. Nate returned to his drafting table, adjusting another line with architectural precision. He'd dismissed these observations, attributing them to the natural evolution of a long marriage, to the empty nest adjustment after their son left for college 6 years ago. Ashley had always been social, always enjoyed attention. He trusted the structural integrity of what they'd built together. The next morning, Nate called Ashley's office to confirm their lunch meeting. "I'm sorry, Mr. Turner," her assistant replied, with evident confusion. "Mrs. Turner left over an hour ago. She mentioned meeting you for lunch." A familiar notification appeared on his phone, a charge at Castelli's restaurant from their joint credit card. Curious, since their reservation wasn't until evening. 45 minutes later, Nate stood in the doorway of Castelli's, a small wrapped package in his pocket, an early anniversary token. Through the ambient lighting, he spotted Ashley immediately, her blonde highlights catching the light. She sat in a corner booth, leaning toward a man with dark hair and a confidence that suggested youth and entitlement. Their fingers intertwined on the table. The man raised her hand to his lips. Nate's architectural mind processed the scene with detached precision, calculating sight lines, measuring the distance between their bodies, assessing structural weaknesses in what he'd thought was solid. The maitre d' approached. "Sir, may I help you find your table?" The young man at Ashley's table looked up then, noticing Nate. Instead of embarrassment, a smile spread across his face. He leaned forward, speaking loudly enough to carry, "Your woman belongs to a real man now." Ashley's head snapped up, her expression transforming from intimate delight to shocked recognition. "Nate! This isn't—" Nate approached their table with the measured pace of a building inspector identifying code violations. He noted the wine, a Barolo he'd introduced her to on their 20th anniversary. He noted her lipstick on the young man's glass. "I believe this concludes my inspection," Nate said, voice steady despite the architectural collapse he felt inside. He placed his credit card on the table. "Please add their bill to this. Consider it my final contribution to this particular project." He turned and walked out, aware of the pitying glances from nearby diners, the whispered commentary, Ashley's heels clicking rapidly behind him as she followed him to the parking lot. "Nate, wait! I can explain. It's not what you think. Cody is just a colleague, a friend." Nate's voice remained level, analytical. "Please don't insult my intelligence by claiming you were discussing business while he kissed your hand. It just happened. It didn't mean anything." Her eyes filled with tears that Nate, for the first time in their marriage, analyzed rather than responded to. "I made a mistake. One mistake." "We'll discuss this at home," Nate replied, opening his car door. "I believe you have unfinished business inside." Driving home, Nate's mind catalogued the evidence like an architectural punch list. Ashley's increased working late evenings, the weekend conferences that left no digital footprint, the subtle withdrawal of physical affection over the past months. In their kitchen that evening, Ashley had prepared his favorite meal, an obvious tactical choice. She'd changed into the blue dress he'd once mentioned, brought out her eyes. "It was a moment of weakness," she said, eyes downcast as she poured his wine. "Cody means nothing. He's just a client who got flirtatious, and I was stupid. It won't happen again." Nate sipped his wine, observing her performance with the detachment of evaluating a design proposal. "When did it start?" "Just last week. It was nothing serious." A detail that didn't align with the evidence. Nate remembered her conference in Chicago 6 weeks ago. The weekend their credit card showed a charge at a hotel restaurant where Cody's social media placed him at the same time. "I see," was all Nate said, watching Ashley's relief at his apparent acceptance. Later, alone in the guest bedroom, Nate stared at the ceiling he'd designed with northern light in mind. His architect's mind began assembling a different kind of blueprint, one that would reveal the true structural integrity of his marriage and determine whether anything remained worth salvaging. Nate woke before dawn, a habit from decades of early job site inspections. He moved quietly to his home office, the house still silent with Ashley asleep. His computer screen illuminated the dim room as he logged into his email, seeking distraction from the architectural collapse of his personal life. Among meeting requests and project updates sat a message with no subject from an unfamiliar address. He opened it with the caution of an inspector testing a questionable support beam. "Mr. Turner, you don't know me, but I think you should know about your wife and Travis Benson. Attached are photos from the Westfield Hotel last month. I'm sorry to be the messenger." Travis Benson, the thought struck Nate like a structural failure inspection. Travis was a client from the Peterson development, married with 2 young children. The Turners had attended his youngest child's christening last year. The attached photos showed Ashley and Travis in the hotel lobby, his hand placed possessively on her lower back. A second photo captured them entering an elevator, her head tilted toward him in familiar intimacy. The timestamp showed a Wednesday afternoon when Ashley had claimed to be at a charity committee meeting. Nate's architectural mind immediately began cross-referencing, calculating timelines, assessing patterns, evaluating load-bearing truths versus decorative falsehoods. He created a new folder labeled Documentation and saved the evidence with the methodical precision that had defined his professional life. He heard Ashley's footsteps in the hallway, then the coffee maker starting. Taking a deep breath, he closed the email and joined her in the kitchen. "Good morning," she said, her voice carefully modulated to sound casual. "I made your favorite breakfast. I thought we could talk before you go to the office." "That's thoughtful," Nate replied, accepting the coffee she offered. He noted her perfect makeup at 6:30 a.m. Unusual for a woman who typically applied cosmetics after breakfast. She'd prepared for this conversation, rehearsed her performance. "About yesterday," she began, sitting across from him with her own untouched coffee. "I want you to know it was a terrible mistake. Cody means nothing to me." Nate nodded, observing rather than immediately responding. "I have that charity luncheon today, then a meeting with the hospital board," she continued. "But I'd like us to have dinner together tonight. Start fresh." "The hospital board meets on Thursdays," Nate observed mildly. "It's Tuesday." A barely perceptible flinch crossed her features before she recovered. "You're right. I meant the fundraising committee. This renovation project has my schedule confused." Nate simply nodded again, filing away the discrepancy like a notation on a blueprint. After Ashley left, Nate received a text notification, a charge at a gas station 40 miles away in the direction of Travis Benson's office. His office phone rang. "Nate, it's James. Missed you at the Henderson lunch yesterday. Everything okay?" James Wells had been Nate's colleague since they'd started at the firm 25 years ago. They'd risen through the ranks together, James now heading the commercial division, while Nate led residential and civic projects. "I could use a coffee break, actually," Nate replied. "Riley's in 15 minutes?" The coffee shop near their office was busy enough to provide privacy through ambient noise. James studied Nate's face as they sat in a corner booth. "You look like you've discovered a major structural flaw mid-construction," James said, stirring his coffee. Nate gave a dry laugh. "That's surprisingly accurate." "Ashley?" Nate looked up sharply. "How did you know?" James shifted uncomfortably. "There have been rumors around the office." "About?" "Ashley's been friendly with some of the junior partners. Nothing I could prove, but enough that people have noticed, especially at the Christmas party last year." The Christmas party where Ashley had spent an hour discussing historic preservation with Brad Myers, a project manager 15 years her junior. Nate had been pleased at her interest in his field. "I've discovered she's been having an affair with Cody Williams," Nate said, the words feeling foreign in his mouth. "And possibly Travis Benson as well." James winced. "I'm sorry, Nate. What are you going to do?" "Apply architectural principles," Nate replied. "Assess the damage. Determine if the structure can be salvaged or requires complete demolition. That's very you, James said with a sad smile. It's the only approach I know. James hesitated. There's something else. There have been rumors about Ashley and Richard. Richard Harper, the firm's managing partner, Nate's direct supervisor. I see, Nate said, his voice betraying no emotion, though he felt the foundation of his professional life trembling along with his personal one. It's probably nothing, James backpedaled, seeing Nate's expression. Office gossip, you know. Nate's phone rang, an unknown number. He excused himself to answer. Mr. Turner, this is Melissa from Bradford Insurance. I'm Ashley's assistant. Her voice lowered. I'm the one who sent you the email about Travis. There's more you should know. Can we meet? That evening, Nate sat at the dining table, architectural plans deliberately spread before him as Ashley entered the house. She wore a new dress he'd never seen, her makeup freshened recently. Working at the dining table, that's unusual, she noted, placing her purse on the sideboard. I wanted to discuss something with you when you got home, Nate replied. How was your fundraising committee meeting? Productive. We're finalizing plans for the spring gala. Interesting. I had lunch with James today. He mentioned the fundraising committee was canceled when the chair had a family emergency. Ashley's composure faltered momentarily. I meant my hospital volunteer meeting, not fundraising. I'm on so many committees lately. Including one with Travis Benson? Nate asked, sliding a printed photo across the table. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. You're having me followed now? An anonymous concerned party sent these. Apparently, your relationship with Travis has not gone unnoticed. It's not what it looks like, Ashley began, her voice shifting to a softer, vulnerable tone. Travis and I are working on a surprise charity auction for you, for our anniversary. Nate nodded thoughtfully. In a hotel room. How generous of him to donate that particular space. You're being paranoid, Ashley snapped, her vulnerable facade cracking. This is why I've been feeling disconnected from you. You're always working, always distracted with your buildings. What did you expect me to do? Sit home alone every night while you obsessed over blueprints? I expected honesty, Nate replied simply. If you weren't so emotionally unavailable. I'll be staying at the Residence Inn tonight, Nate interrupted, gathering his papers. I think we both need some space to consider next steps. You're overreacting, Ashley insisted, her tone shifting again to conciliatory. Come on, Nate. We can work through this. 28 years of marriage deserves more than walking out over a misunderstanding. Her phone buzzed on the sideboard. Nate glimpsed the screen as it lit up, a message from Travis. I agree that 28 years deserves something, Nate replied, moving toward the door. It deserves the truth, for starters. As he drove away, Nate realized that the structure he'd believed most solid in his life had been compromised from within. Like any architect facing a failed inspection, he now needed to determine whether rehabilitation was possible or if the only safe option was to condemn the entire structure and rebuild elsewhere. The conference room's eastern exposure bathed Nate's presentation boards in morning light. He stood before the assembled project team, pointing out revisions to the Westview Community Center design. By reinforcing this support column, we've opened the atrium vista while maintaining structural integrity, he explained, indicating the blueprint with his laser pointer. The result is both aesthetically pleasing and functionally sound. Richard Harper, managing partner and Nate's supervisor for 15 years, frowned. The column placement seems arbitrary. It disrupts the flow between spaces. Nate blinked. Richard had championed this very design approach in their preliminary meeting last month. The placement follows the golden ratio, Nate explained. It creates visual harmony while providing necessary structural support. It feels awkward, Richard insisted. The board will never approve it. James caught Nate's eye from across the table, his expression communicating silent support. Nate's phone vibrated in his pocket. Normally, he would never check messages during a presentation, but given recent events, he glanced discreetly at the screen. An email from the unknown sender who had provided the Travis Benson photos. Subject line, Ashley and Richard Harper. The conference room seemed to tilt slightly. Nate slipped the phone back into his pocket, forced himself to focus on the design critique that now carried double meaning. Perhaps we should table the discussion until we can present alternatives, Nate suggested, his professional voice steady despite the architectural collapse he felt inside. Richard nodded curtly. Good idea. The current design lacks integrity. Let's reconvene next week. As the team filed out, Richard placed a hand on Nate's shoulder. Stay behind a moment, would you? When they were alone, Richard's demeanor shifted from critical to collegial. Everything all right, Nate? You seem distracted lately. I've had some personal matters to attend to, Nate replied carefully. Anything I can help with? We go back a long way. Further than you know, Nate thought. He retrieved his phone, opened the new email, and placed it on the conference table between them. The photo showed Richard and Ashley at an intimate corner table at Vincenzo's, the restaurant where Richard claimed to take only his most important clients. Their hands were clasped across the table. The timestamp showed last Thursday, when Nate had been in Boston for a client meeting. Richard's face drained of color. Nate, I can explain. I'm not here for explanations, Nate interrupted, his voice calm despite the devastation coursing through him. I'm here to establish boundaries. It wasn't serious, Richard began. Ashley approached me. She said you two had an understanding. We do now, Nate replied. Here's my understanding. I'll be transferring the Westview project to James's team. You and I will maintain professional contact only when absolutely necessary. You can't just, I can and will file a complaint with the partnership board regarding your relationship with my wife, which violated both professional ethics and our 30-year friendship, or we can handle this quietly. Richard swallowed. Nate, you have to believe me. She pursued me. She showed interest in my work, asked about my design philosophy. She said your marriage was essentially over, and yet she used information I shared with her in confidence to critique my work just now, didn't she? Nate asked, the pieces falling into place. His innovative atrium design had been something he'd sketched late at night, explaining the concept to Ashley over breakfast. She'd seemed genuinely interested. Richard's silence was confirmation enough. I'll have my decision about remaining with the firm by the end of the week, Nate said, gathering his presentation materials. Until then, I suggest you focus on explaining to the partners why the Westview client is requesting me specifically despite your concerns about my design. In the hallway, James fell into step beside him. That bad? Worse, Nate replied. Ashley and Richard. James winced. I was afraid of that. What's your next move? Professional separation from Richard, and a consultation with Catherine Martinez, the attorney who hired us for her office renovation. Smart choice. She specializes in high-conflict divorce, doesn't she? Nate nodded. I designed her office to convey both warmth and strength. I suspect I'll need both in the coming months. In his car, Nate sat motionless, hands gripping the steering wheel. The betrayal had penetrated every aspect of his life, personal, professional, financial. His phone rang, Catherine's office confirming his appointment for tomorrow. He stared at the architectural magazine on his passenger seat, featuring one of his award-winning designs on the cover. In architecture, when a critical support structure fails, you don't patch it with temporary fixes. You analyze the entire system, identify all vulnerabilities, and develop a comprehensive rehabilitation plan. Or you start over with a new foundation. For the first time since discovering Ashley's betrayal, Nate felt a sense of clarity. His marriage might be collapsing, but his response wouldn't be. He would approach this personal devastation with the same methodical precision that had defined his professional success. He called James. "I need copies of all communication between Richard and the Westview clients, and any documentation of timeline changes to projects I've handled in the last 6 months. Gathering evidence. An architect always measures twice before cutting once. Next, he called Catherine Martinez's office again. "Please tell Mrs. Martinez I'll bring comprehensive documentation to our meeting and ask if she can recommend a forensic accountant." As he ended the call, Nate realized he had shifted from shock to strategy. The pain remained, but now it had purpose. Like any good architect, he wouldn't just survive this structural failure. He would use it as an opportunity to build something stronger, designed with hard-won wisdom. Catherine Martinez's office reflected the design principles Nate had incorporated 3 years ago. Warm walnut paneling conveying gravitas, strategic lighting creating both comfort and clarity, an environment balanced between welcoming and authoritative. She greeted him with a professional handshake, her expression communicating competence rather than pity. "Nate, I was sorry to hear about your situation," she said, gesturing to the leather chairs in her consultation area rather than the more intimidating desk arrangement. "I appreciate you seeing me promptly," he replied, placing a leather portfolio on the table between them. "You mentioned bringing documentation?" Nate nodded, opening the portfolio to reveal meticulously organized sections. "I've approached this the way I would a building inspection, systematic evaluation of all potential structural failures." Catherine's eyebrows rose as she reviewed his materials. "Most clients come in with a box of crumpled receipts, if anything. This is comprehensive. I'm an architect. Documentation is second nature." For the next hour, Nate methodically presented evidence of Ashley's affairs: text messages, credit card statements, hotel receipts, photographic evidence, timeline inconsistencies. He explained the professional complications with Richard, the impact on his standing at the firm, and his concerns about financial impropriety. "I've identified several unexplained withdrawals from our joint account over the past year," he explained, indicating a spreadsheet with highlighted transactions. "5,000 here, 3,000 there, always just below the threshold that would trigger a notification to my phone." Catherine studied the financial documents. "Have you confronted Ashley about these?" "Not yet. I wanted to understand the complete structural failure before determining whether rehabilitation is possible. Based on what you've shown me, I believe you have grounds for filing under adultery rather than irreconcilable differences," Catherine said. "This would potentially impact the financial settlement, especially given her misuse of joint funds." "And the professional complications with my supervisor? That adds another dimension. If your position at the firm has been compromised due to her actions, it affects both current and future earning potential." Catherine made several notes. "What are your primary concerns regarding the divorce?" "Financial security, professional reputation, and dignity," Nate replied without hesitation. "I'm not interested in vengeance, but I won't be exploited further. Your documentation gives us a strong position. I recommend securing your financial accounts immediately. Create separate accounts for any new income. Document all remaining joint assets, and prepare for Ashley to escalate when she realizes you're proceeding with divorce. Escalate how? Based on my experience, when confronted with this level of evidence, someone who's maintained such elaborate deceptions typically either attempts reconciliation through manipulation or becomes hostile and retaliatory, sometimes both in succession. Nate nodded thoughtfully. I designed buildings to withstand both everyday stresses and extraordinary events. I should have applied the same principle to my marriage. It's not too late to apply it to your future, Catherine replied. Now, let's discuss next steps. The following morning, Nate met with Edward Brennan, the financial advisor Catherine had recommended. The private office at First National Bank provided the discretion needed for their conversation. Based on the account statements you've provided, Mrs. Turner has withdrawn approximately $47,000 from joint accounts over the past 14 months, Edward explained, indicating the spreadsheet he'd compiled. The pattern suggests these weren't household expenses. They coincide with her affair timeline, Nate observed. I recommend immediately securing your retirement accounts and investments. While these are marital assets subject to division, we can prevent further unauthorized withdrawals. What about my regular income? Establish separate accounts today. Direct all future deposits to these new accounts. Document everything for the divorce proceedings. As they completed the necessary paperwork, Edward hesitated. There's one more thing. Yesterday, there was an attempted transfer from your joint investment account. It was flagged due to the amount, $75,000. Ashley tried to transfer $75,000? Nate's architect mind immediately calculated the significance. Approximately half the liquid assets in that particular account. The request was denied because it required dual authorization for amounts over $50,000, but it suggests she's aware you're taking steps toward divorce. Thank you for telling me, Nate said, a cold certainty settling in his chest. Please implement all security measures immediately. That evening, Nate met Marcus Chen, a cybersecurity specialist recommended by Catherine, at a quiet coffee shop away from his usual haunts. The evidence you've collected is good, Marcus said, reviewing the digital materials on his laptop. But we need to ensure everything is properly authenticated for court. Timestamps, metadata, chain of custody, these matter for digital evidence. What do you suggest? I'll help you implement proper documentation protocols. We'll secure your devices and accounts against unauthorized access, and I can recover deleted text messages that might provide additional evidence. As their consultation continued, Marcus asked, Have you considered going public with this? There's a popular YouTuber who specializes in exposing infidelity. Could add pressure during negotiations. Nate considered this carefully. I prefer to handle this with dignity. Public exposure would be a last resort, not a first response. Smart. Keep it as leverage, but focus on legal channels first. Speaking of which, you should secure your electronic devices immediately. If Ashley realizes you're gathering evidence, she might attempt to access your computer or email. She already has, Nate replied, showing Marcus the notification from his email security service. 3 failed login attempts to my personal email yesterday. Then we're implementing security measures just in time. Let's start with 2-factor authentication on all your accounts. As Nate drove home that night, he realized how thoroughly his architect's approach had served him. Where many might have reacted emotionally, he had responded structurally. Assessing damage, consulting specialists, developing a comprehensive renovation plan for his life. Tomorrow, the implementation would begin. Catherine would file the divorce papers, timed for delivery when Ashley would be hosting her weekly lunch with friends. The foundation for Nate's new life was taking shape, designed not with vengeance, but with the careful precision that had defined his professional success. For the first time since standing in the doorway of Castelli's restaurant, Nate felt something beyond pain or shock, a quiet confidence in his ability to rebuild, to design a future based on integrity rather than illusion. The Willow Creek Country Club dining room bustled with Tuesday luncheon activity. Ashley Turner sat at her regular table, holding court among 5 friends who comprised the social circle she'd cultivated through Nate's professional connections. Her animated description of the charity gala she was organizing commanded their attention. "We've secured the Harrington Gallery for the evening. The governor's wife has confirmed attendance," she explained, gesturing with a hand adorned by the anniversary diamond Nate had given her 5 years ago. She didn't notice the man in the dark suit approaching until he stood directly beside her chair. "Mrs. Ashley Turner?" he asked formally. Ashley glanced up, momentarily confused. "Yes. Can I help you?" "I'm Roger Williams from Stanton Legal Services. I'm authorized to serve you with divorce papers filed by your husband, Nathan Turner." The dining room seemed to freeze as he placed a thick envelope on the table beside her water glass. "You've been served. These documents include evidence of your affairs with Cody Williams, Travis Benson, Richard Harmon, and others. The filing cites adultery as grounds for divorce." Ashley's face drained of color as heads turned from nearby tables. Her friends exchanged glances, ranging from shocked to uncomfortably knowing. "There must be some mistake," she managed, her voice thin. "No mistake, Mrs. Turner. I've verified your identity. Good day." The process server turned and walked away, his job complete. Ashley stared at the envelope, her hands trembling slightly. When she looked up, she found her friend studying her with expressions ranging from sympathy to barely concealed curiosity. "I need to go," she said, gathering her purse and the damning envelope. "Family emergency." 20 minutes later, Ashley stormed into Nate's home office, where he sat calmly reviewing specifications for the Westview project. Her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide her flushed face or the fury in her eyes. "How dare you humiliate me like that?" she demanded, throwing the envelope onto his desk. In front of everyone. Nate regarded her with the same measured assessment he would give a building showing signs of structural distress. "I believe public humiliation began at Castelli's restaurant, not with legal papers. This is absurd. You're throwing away 28 years over nothing." "Nothing?" Nate opened his desk drawer and removed a folder, sliding it across to her. "These credit card statements show hotel charges when you claim to be at conferences. These phone records show hundreds of text messages to Cody, Travis, and Richard. These bank statements show nearly $50,000 withdrawn from our joint accounts. You've been spying on me?" Ashley's approach shifted instantly, tears welling in her eyes. "Nate, I made mistakes, terrible mistakes. But I love you. We can work through this with counseling." When Nate didn't respond, she moved around the desk, placing her hand on his shoulder, leaning close enough that he could smell the familiar perfume he'd given her last Christmas. "Remember our vows," she whispered. "For better or worse, everyone deserves a second chance." Nate gently removed her hand from his shoulder. "This isn't about second chances, Ashley. It's about patterns. Sustained deception requires planning, not momentary weakness." Her expression hardened. "Fine. If that's how you want to play this, remember that California is a community property state. I get half of everything, your retirement, your investments, this house you're so proud of designing." "You should read the filing more carefully," Nate replied. "The adultery claim is substantiated with evidence of financial misappropriation. Your withdrawal of funds to finance your affairs impacts the division of assets. Ashley's tactical approach shifted again. If you push this, I'll tell everyone you were emotionally abusive, that your obsession with work was neglect. Who do you think they'll believe? The devoted wife or the cold, distant architect? I think they'll believe documented evidence over unsubstantiated claims. Nate indicated a small recording device on his desk, including this conversation, which demonstrates your willingness to make false allegations. For a moment, Ashley looked genuinely stunned. Then her eyes narrowed. You calculated all this, planned it like one of your precious buildings. I learned from the best, Nate replied. You've been designing deceptions for years. I simply created a more solid structure. This isn't over, Ashley snapped, grabbing her purse. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Actually, I believe I finally do. After Ashley left, Nate contacted Catherine to inform her of the confrontation. Her response was professionally satisfied, but cautionary. This is textbook first response, she explained. Attempted manipulation through seduction, followed by financial threats, then escalation to false allegations. The recording was excellent strategy. Be prepared for her to reach out to friends and colleagues with her version of events. Already happening, Nate confirmed. James texted that she called him crying about my midlife crisis and irrational behavior. Maintain your professional demeanor. Document all communication. And prepare for tomorrow's meeting with Jennifer Benson. The following afternoon, Jennifer Benson sat across from Nate in Catherine's office, her composed appearance belying the strain evident in her eyes. At 42, she was nearly 15 years younger than Travis, a fact that now carried ironic significance given his affair with Ashley. Thank you for meeting with me, Mr. Turner, she said. This is difficult. For both of us, Nate acknowledged, but potentially helpful to our respective situations. When I found the text messages between Travis and your wife, I was initially just focused on my own marriage, Jennifer explained, removing a folder from her bag. But then I realized the extent of the deception involved multiple people. She slid several pages across the table: hotel receipts, text message transcripts, photographs. Travis claimed business trips on these dates, she explained. Our joint credit card shows dinner for two, spa services, expensive champagne. The messages between them discuss coordinating their stories. Catherine made notes as Nate reviewed the materials. These align with our existing timeline, she observed, and provide additional documentation of financial misappropriation. There's something else, Jennifer added, her voice tightening slightly. After you filed for divorce, Mr. Turner, Ashley called Travis in a panic. He doesn't know I overheard the call. She asked him what evidence might exist, who else might know about their relationship, and she mentioned something about Richard and an office conspiracy against you. Nate nodded thoughtfully. That would align with recent professional complications. I believe a coordinated approach benefits both your cases, Catherine suggested. Shared evidence strengthens both positions while maintaining appropriate privacy boundaries. As Jennifer prepared to leave, she hesitated. Mr. Turner? For what it's worth, Travis mentioned that Ashley talked about other relationships too. She apparently found it thrilling to discuss one affair while engaging in another. Thank you for your candor, Nate replied. I hope both of us find resolution that allows for rebuilding. After Jennifer departed, Catherine updated Nate on recent developments. Ashley attempted to access your email again yesterday. The security measures Marcus implemented documented the attempt. This strengthens our case regarding her pattern of deception and potential for evidence tampering. Nate nodded. The structure is taking shape. What's our next step? We have the initial hearing next week. Given the evidence gathered, I believe we're in a strong position. However, be prepared for Ashley to present herself as the wronged party. As Nate left Catherine's office, he felt a sense of momentum building, the same satisfaction he experienced when a complex architectural project moved from planning to implementation. The foundation had been laid for reclaiming his dignity and securing his future. The county courthouse's marble columns and vaulted ceilings reminded Nate of the classical revival projects he'd studied in architecture school. Today, the building's solemnity matched the gravity of the proceedings about to unfold. Nate sat beside Catherine at the plaintiff's table, his charcoal suit and burgundy tie projecting professional confidence. Across the aisle, Ashley wore a conservative navy dress that subtly emphasized her vulnerability. Her attorney, Michael Weber, leaned toward her, whispering final instructions. Judge Eleanor Harrison entered, her experienced gaze sweeping the courtroom before taking her seat. Turner versus Turner, petition for dissolution of marriage, the clerk announced. Your Honor, Michael Weber rose. Before we begin, I'd like to express our disappointment that this matter couldn't be resolved through mediation. Mrs. Turner remains committed to reconciliation despite her husband's refusal to consider counseling. Catherine's response was measured. Your Honor, given the extensive evidence of Mrs. Turner's multiple affairs and financial impropriety, mediation proved unproductive. Mr. Turner has approached these proceedings with dignity and restraint. Judge Harrison reviewed the file before her. I've examined the initial filings. Mr. Weber, your client is contesting the grounds for divorce, but seeking substantial alimony. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Turner dedicated 28 years to supporting her husband's career. Her volunteer work and community involvement directly enhanced his professional standing. She's entitled to maintain the lifestyle established during marriage. And the adultery claim? Judge Harrison asked. My client acknowledges a brief indiscretion with one individual during a period when Mr. Turner was emotionally unavailable due to work commitments. We consider this an isolated incident in an otherwise devoted marriage. Judge Harrison turned to Catherine. Miss Martinez, your response? Your Honor, we have documented evidence of not one indiscretion but multiple ongoing affairs conducted by Mrs. Turner over at least 14 months. We can demonstrate that Mrs. Turner used marital assets to finance these relationships, withdrew substantial funds without accounting for their use, and engaged in behavior that directly damaged Mr. Turner's professional standing. I'd like to review this evidence, Judge Harrison stated. Catherine presented the court with the meticulously organized documentation Nate had compiled. Your Honor will note the timeline correlation between Mrs. Turner's unexplained absences, credit card charges at hotels and restaurants, and text message communications with multiple partners. Judge Harrison studied the materials with increasing attention. This is remarkably thorough documentation. My client approaches personal matters with the same precision he brings to his architectural practice, Catherine explained. Let's proceed with witness testimony, Judge Harrison directed. Jennifer Benson took the stand first, her testimony establishing the relationship between Ashley and Travis, corroborating the timeline Nate had documented. To your knowledge, was Mrs. Turner's relationship with your husband isolated or part of a pattern? Catherine asked. Objection calls for speculation, Weber interjected. I'll rephrase. Did your husband ever mention other relationships involving Mrs. Turner? Jennifer nodded. Yes. Travis told me Ashley often talked about someone named Cody during their time together. She seemed to find it exciting to discuss one relationship while engaged in another. The restaurant server from Castelli's testified next, confirming that he had observed Ashley with different male companions on multiple occasions when Nate was known to be traveling. Mrs. Turner would request my section specifically, he explained. She introduced the gentlemen as business associates, but their behavior was intimate. Weber's cross-examination grew increasingly desperate as each witness corroborated Nate's documentation. When Richard Harper reluctantly testified to his involvement with Ashley, Weber whispered urgently to his client. "Your Honor," Weber announced, "Mrs. Turner would like to testify on her own behalf." Ashley took the stand, her expression composed into perfect contrition. Her testimony painted a picture of a neglected wife seeking emotional connection when her husband became consumed with his career. Nate was physically present, but emotionally absent, she explained, dabbing at her eyes. "I made terrible mistakes seeking validation elsewhere, but they were moments of weakness, not calculated deceptions." During cross-examination, Catherine maintained professional composure while systematically exposing contradictions in Ashley's narrative. "You testified that your relationship with Cody Williams began recently, correct?" "Yes, just a few weeks before Nate discovered us." Catherine displayed a hotel receipt. "Can you explain this charge from 6 months earlier, showing room service for 2 at the Lakeside Resort where Mr. Williams was attending a conference?" Ashley hesitated. "That must be a different occasion, perhaps a charity event." And this text message to Mr. Williams from the same date stating, "Last night was amazing. Can't wait until next time?" Ashley's composure slipped. "You're taking that out of context. Nate obviously manipulated these messages." "Mrs. Turner, are you suggesting that your husband fabricated hundreds of text messages, hotel receipts, and witness testimonies?" "He's an architect. He's obsessed with details and control," Judge Harrison intervened. "Mrs. Turner, please respond to the question without outbursts." As testimony continued, Ashley's carefully constructed narrative unraveled further. Her claim of financial transparency collapsed when confronted with documentation of the unexplained withdrawals. Her assertion that she never discussed Nate's work with others disintegrated when presented with text messages to Richard critiquing Nate's designs. When all testimony concluded, Judge Harrison delivered her ruling with measured authority. "Based on the extensive evidence presented, I find the petition for dissolution on grounds of adultery to be substantiated." Regarding financial matters, Mrs. Turner's documented misappropriation of marital assets and the impact of her actions on Mr. Turner's professional standing will be considered in the final settlement. She continued, "The request for substantial alimony is denied. Mrs. Turner's behavior constitutes misconduct that directly affected the financial position of the marriage. The marital home will be sold, with proceeds divided according to contribution documentation Mr. Turner has provided." Ashley's whispered, "This isn't fair," carried clearly in the hushed courtroom. Judge Harrison concluded, "This court values honesty and integrity in proceedings, as they reflect integrity in life choices. Final decree will be issued following asset division determination." As they exited the courtroom, Catherine shook Nate's hand. "Excellent outcome." Judge Harrison clearly recognized the comprehensive nature of our evidence. Nate watched Ashley conferring urgently with Weber, her gestures increasingly animated as reality settled in. "It's not about winning," he said quietly. "It's about truth having structural integrity." For the first time since discovering Ashley's betrayal, Nate felt not just vindication, but peace. the satisfaction of a foundation properly rebuilt after catastrophic failure. 6 months later, Nate stood in the empty living room of the home he'd designed for his life with Ashley. Sunlight streamed through the Palladian windows he'd specified to maximize natural light throughout the day. The real estate agent checked items off her closing preparation list, while the new owner's inspector examined the HVAC system. "Final walkthrough looks good," Susan Chen, the agent, confirmed. "The buyers are thrilled to be purchasing a Turner-designed home. Your reputation added significant value." Nate nodded, surveying the space one last time. "I designed this house for a different life. It's fitting that it will shelter a young family starting their journey." James appeared in the doorway, carrying a box labeled Awards. "Last item from the office," he announced. "Everything else is loaded in the truck or already at your new place." As they walked through the empty rooms, James asked, "Any regrets about selling? About the house?" "No, it's just structure and materials now. The life it contained ended some time ago." Nate paused by the master bedroom doorway. "Though I regret not recognizing the warning signs earlier." "You designed a beautiful new place," James observed. "Smaller, but perfectly suited to your needs." "With excellent southern exposure and a dedicated workspace for my independent projects," Nate agreed. "The Westview Community Center opening next month will be my first completed project as an independent architect." After parting from James, Nate drove to his sister Ellen's home for their weekly family dinner. His nephew Michael met him in the driveway, helping with the wine and dessert Nate had brought. "Uncle Nate, can I ask your advice about something?" Michael asked, as they carried the items inside. At 24, he had recently graduated from business school and started his first serious relationship. "Of course," Nate replied, noting the familiar earnestness in his nephew's expression. Over dinner, Ellen and her husband shared news about their upcoming anniversary trip, carefully avoiding mention of Nate's recent divorce. After helping clear the dishes, Nate joined Michael on the back deck. "What advice did you want to ask about?" Nate inquired. Michael hesitated. "It's about relationships. How do you know when someone is right for you? When you can truly trust them?" Nate considered this carefully. "I believe you observe patterns, not promises. Watch how they handle small disappointments, how they speak about others when those people aren't present, whether their actions align with their words." "That's very architectural," Michael observed with a small smile. "We all use the tools we've developed," Nate acknowledged. "But I've found that character, like structural integrity, reveals itself under stress, not in dramatic declarations or grand gestures." "Mom mentioned you're dating someone new. The landscape architect from the Westview project?" Nate smiled. "We've had coffee a few times. Diana is intelligent, straightforward, and passionate about her work. We're proceeding thoughtfully." "You seem happier now than before. Everything happened," Michael observed. "I am," Nate realized, somewhat surprised by the truth of it. Not despite the collapse, but in some ways because of it. "I discovered my own resilience, and I'm designing a life based on authentic connections rather than appearances." As they rejoined the family inside, Ellen mentioned the community center opening. "The newspaper called it your most ambitious public project to date. They're saying it will transform the neighborhood." "It's designed to bring people together," Nate explained. "After everything that happened, I wanted to create something that strengthens community bonds rather than just looking impressive." Later that week, Nate sat at his favorite coffee shop near his new apartment, reviewing plans for a sustainable housing development. The morning sunlight cast geometric patterns across his table, the kind of natural detail he incorporated into his designs. "Nate?" He looked up to find Ashley standing beside his table. 6 months had changed her. her designer clothes replaced by simpler attire, her highlights grown out to reveal more gray than she'd previously allowed to show. "Hello, Ashley," he replied, his tone polite but reserved. "May I sit for a moment?" Nate gestured to the chair across from him. Ashley glanced at his architectural plans. New project? Affordable housing with environmental sustainability. A collaboration with the city. She nodded, an uncomfortable silence stretching between them. "I've been in therapy," she finally said, "trying to understand why I did what I did." "I hope that's helpful for you," Nate replied, meaning it despite everything. "The house sold for more than we expected," she continued. "Your design made the difference, as usual. The market is strong right now." Ashley studied him, seeming to search for something in his expression. "You look well, peaceful." "I am," Nate acknowledged. "And you?" A flash of something, regret perhaps, crossed her features. "I'm adjusting. Starting over at 56 isn't what I'd planned." Few structural failures are planned. "The question is what you build next." Ashley smiled sadly at his architectural metaphor. Always the builder, even when discussing disaster. "It's the language I know." "I should go," she said, gathering her purse. "I just wanted to see how you were doing." Nate nodded, noting with mild surprise that he felt compassion rather than satisfaction at her diminished circumstances. "Take care, Ashley." After she left, Nate returned to his plans, making a small adjustment to maximize natural light in the community spaces. His phone rang. Catherine Martinez calling with news about the final paperwork. "Everything's official," she reported. "The last financial transfers are complete." "Thank you for your guidance throughout this process," Nate replied. "Your expertise was invaluable. How are you feeling about the conclusion?" Nate considered this as he watched Ashley through the window, walking toward her car, a modest sedan rather than the luxury SUV she'd insisted on during their marriage. Like an architect who discovered hidden structural damage, implemented necessary repairs, and emerged with a deeper understanding of both design and materials, he answered. "I wouldn't choose to repeat the experience, but I value the wisdom gained from it." As he ended the call, Nate returned to his sustainable housing design with renewed focus. The structure that had collapsed wasn't just his marriage, but his understanding of trust and partnership. What he was building now, both professionally and personally, incorporated those hard-earned lessons: transparency in design, integrity in materials, and a foundation built on truth rather than appearances. Dignity isn't determined by what happens to you, but by how you respond when the structures you trusted collapse. Nate's journey from betrayal to rebuilding demonstrates that even catastrophic failures can become the foundation for something stronger when approached with integrity and purpose. Like any well-designed building, relationships require both aesthetic beauty and structural soundness. When Nate discovered that his marriage maintained only the appearance of stability while concealing critical weaknesses, he applied the same methodical assessment he would to a compromised structure, not rushing to demolition, but carefully evaluating whether rehabilitation was possible or complete rebuilding necessary. Many of us have experienced betrayals of various kinds. Perhaps not as dramatic as Ashley's calculated deceptions, but painful nonetheless. The wisdom lies not in avoiding pain, but in recognizing how we respond to it. Do we patch over fundamental flaws, hoping they'll somehow hold? Or do we have the courage to examine the entire foundation and rebuild properly? Age brings a particular advantage in life's architectural challenges. We've witnessed enough structural failures to recognize warning signs earlier. We understand that flashy facades often mask underlying weaknesses. We know that true craftsmanship reveals itself not in perfect conditions, but when stresses test every connection and support. As you navigate your own relationships, whether with family, friends, or partners, consider what principles from Nate's approach might strengthen your personal architecture. Are you designing with both beauty and integrity? Are you establishing boundaries that protect your dignity while allowing authentic connection? Are you building something that will withstand not just everyday stresses, but unexpected storms? Remember that the most impressive structures aren't those that never face challenges, but those that incorporate wisdom gained from previous collapses into their very foundation.